Names are very, very important, aren't they? Because with the names, we have an identity, and our name matters. It is who we are. They locate us as particular people in a particular place and time. This is who we are. I think my experience of having quite a few friends and relatives who have transitioned, and their experience of having a new name, and has also been made this even more sort of significant in my thinking as well. And I'm sure you know people who may have transitioned and chosen a new name, or some people like my sister who was named Karen, but everyone throughout her life called her Karen. So she got fed up and in her 20s changed the spelling in deed poll. So her name didn't change, but the spelling did, in the hope that more people would call her Karen rather than Karen. Names matter, don't they? When we prepare orders of service for funerals and memorials, we have the official birth name, but so many people have a name that they're referred to as. So our last memorial here was Bettine, but nobody ever called her Bettine. She was Bet. And the family insisted that during the prayers I referred to her as Bet. Names really matter, don't they? So I want you to listen again to the Sadducees when they tell us the story about this particular woman, and I want you to hear what they say about this woman and her name. Some Sadducees who say there's no resurrection came to Jesus and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers, the first married and died childless, and the second and the third, and so on. In the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. This story, the central person in this story is a woman, but why don't we know her name? Why is this nameless woman in the story at the centre of this sacred lesson without a name? And why is this such a common thing in the biblical record, where so many women are not named? There's the story of the unnamed concubine in Judges chapter 19. There's so many stories like this. The woman in this story dies unmarried. Perhaps she dies free, no longer searching for her purpose in being the family's wife. Perhaps she dies no longer suffering under the social stigma of never being a mother, even despite having 7 husbands try to help her and them become a parent, a father and a mother. Perhaps she no longer suffers the social stigma of being a woman whose every husband seems to come to a sudden end. Perhaps she dies in bitterness or in bondage, trapped under what it means for her to have her life unfolded in this way. If men receive the legacy of their name in their children, as was the practice in that culture, what do women have? Without children in that place and time, she bears no significance. Her name will not be remembered, it seems. This nameless woman in the Sadducees' story faces a crisis, and like many women, even today, she remains trapped within systems that deny her her full personhood. And yet she's not actually nameless, is she? We simply don't know what her name was. Oluwatomasin Oradane, very hard name, an elder in the Presbyterian Church of the USA, is an African-American theologian, ethicist, and teaches black religious traditions. And she's written this reflection on the nameless woman, imagining her possible names. I quote, "Is she Abella, meaning breathing? Is she Eve, meaning living? Perhaps she has a name that suggests she survived as long as she did. Perhaps she's Gabrielle, God's bravest woman, or Ether, resilient, Samara, watched over by God. Perhaps her name speaks to her life's resilience among many misfortunes. Does her name perhaps convey the manner in which she lived in the world, Kaya, full of life? Is God's faithfulness known in her name, Elise, promise of God. Johanna, God is merciful. Or Johanna, as the Dutch would say. And our oldest daughter's middle name is Johanna. God is merciful. Does her name signal her tenderness and vulnerability? Leah, delicate woman. Her strength or fortitude? Maria, rebellious woman. Michaela or Michelle, who is like God. Her desire? Ruth, meaning companion. Maybe her name, though, signals her strange and ultimate invisibility, a name like Zillah, meaning like a shadow. Oluwatosamison goes on to say, quote, "She is all these names and more. She cannot die any more. In Jesus' eyes, neither her companionship nor her name comprises the arc of her meaning. Her life does. She is a child of the resurrection." The Sadducees are not actually interested in who she is at all. Their question is really about property, because in this system of marriage, levirate marriage as it was called, marriage functioned as a mechanism for transferring women between brothers in the hope that one of the brothers would have a son in order for the father's name to continue. The woman is a means to an end, to produce an heir for the dead brother. And the Sadducees simply assume that these legal arrangements will extend into all eternity. For the Sadducees, her purpose is to bear children, and her job is to fulfill the cultural expectations placed upon her. Even when she outlives them all, they still only are interested in the 7 brothers. The Sadducees present an inventory of the men, I should say, this woman was not able to keep alive. So they put the question about property to Jesus, assuming he'll provide them expert legal advice on who gets to own what, like a good bequest lawyer, advice on how their estate should best be carved up. Jesus dodges the question entirely and answers in a completely different and unexpected manner by saying, marriage doesn't even matter. What we have placed a premium on, God ignores. Jesus even goes on and says this radical thing. Those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection of the dead, inferring, of course, that this applies to the woman, that she is worthy, neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. This woman whose name you omit, whose property you covet, whose agony you paper over, and whose memory you elide, Jesus says this woman is like an angel. She is a child of God. She is a child of the resurrection. This reminds me so much of the story of Cain and Abel. Cain's name means property, power, success, and Abel means empty, vapor, nothing. And remember, Cain, the prosperous, the successful, the strong one, kills his brother Abel, the nothing, the nobody, thinking that he could just erase Abel from the face of the earth. But remember, the blood of Abel calls out from the ground. The earth holds that memory of that trauma. And who hears that trauma? Who hears the ground calling out? God. God hears the ground calling out and says, your brother's blood calls out for me from the ground. Where is your brother? God never forgets. God holds all those memories. Abel, this woman, and all the unnamed people whose stories have been elided are all like angels, children of God, children of the resurrection. Where is the realm in which Jesus' resurrected body existed? Where do we see the resurrection? In which realm, in which space and time was the reality of the resurrection made real? In this world. When Jesus was resurrected, the reality of that, the miracle of that, the new creation was in this current world. That is telling us, and then here again Jesus invokes, of all the people you would expect to invoke to support his argument, none of us were expecting that he would invoke Moses and the burning bush. And he does that in part because Moses himself invokes Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. People from the past. And what this is telling us is that the realm in which God's resurrection life is manifest is this world. That life that God is about partnering with us, retaining and establishing the identity and the name of all people as children of God, children of the resurrection, as angels. God's partnership is with this world, a partnership oriented towards life. And think about that burning bush, a thing that is supposed to destroy life and a thing that is not supposed to speak. It has this double paradox, this double mystery in a sense. Jesus says resurrection is like this burning bush, something that looks deadly but isn't, and that shouldn't speak but does. Resurrection is not what we expect it to be. It doesn't look or sound like what we are expecting. And as Moses refers, as I said, to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, people who travelled to a foreign land under God's guidance, had Abraham who had a child at an impossible age, Jacob who was deceiver and yet wrestled with God. These people experienced the resurrection life of God in this world. Resurrection is about journeying towards one's death and beyond one's death with the hope that our life before death may be a life of fullness, and knowing that our life after death will be a life without tears and where our identity is fully and wonderfully known. Resurrection is wrestling with God and living. Resurrection means living on with circumstances even though it seems impossible. Resurrection is persistently and stubbornly holding on to the life that God gives us. Resurrection is where God is in this world, showing us the way ahead, showing us that death with a capital D has lost its sting, as Paul says, so that death with a capital D no longer can thwart the purpose of creation, the goodness of creation, where God looked at everything that God had made and said, that is good. God looks at every person that God has made and says, you are good. God looks at the unnamed woman passed between 7 brothers, whose story is told without a name and whose trauma and agony is forgotten, and says to her, you are good. I remember you. Your memory shall live on forever in the heart of God, as shall all of ours. Amen.